starting with 1, since once the sheet is imported, this A will be replaced with education and B will be replaced with status, and rest we can start accessing the data from row number 1. So let's say for I equal to 1 to RC, that is row count. So what we'll do is one by one we'll start fetching the data. So first of all, to fetch the data, we have to use data table.set current row. Okay, this will set the current row for the data table. So let's say current row is I. Okay, so starting with row 1, so the current row will be 1. So as the loop iteration keeps on changing, increasing, the row count, the pointer will go on moving to the different rows, and we'll start fetching the data from each and every row. Okay, and data table dot value. If you remember, this is the code for fetching the value from the data table, and the parameters for data table dot value are is your column name, since we want the education details, comma, the sheet name, which is sheet 1. Okay, so now what we have to do is you have to match this value, each and every value of your data table, with the ones in your web list. So let's do the next thing, that is to capture the object of the web list using our object repository. Okay, I'm taking this object, I'm dragging it over here, and I'll get the code. And as usual for web list, we have get item and index, which we put I. Okay, now remember guys, now here we'll have to use 2 loops. Why? One loop will run through the data table. Okay, I'll just open the data table. So suppose in runtime your data table will look like this. So suppose we are taking the first value xyz. So for xyz, the loop has to run for different values of my web list. So xyz has to compare with each of this value, MBA, BSc, BTech, MTech. Okay, similarly for the next value, that is MBA. Okay, it has to match with all the values starting with MBA to BCom. So what I have to do is, first of all, I have to have a loop to run this, all the values of my web list, and secondly there will be a loop which will control the flow of this data. So there will be 2 loops. Okay, this is the concept of using 2 loops, nested loops. So the second thing, for the first loop we have the maximum count RC. Let's say the items count IC, the row count RC was for data table, the high count IC is for items count in my web list. Okay, so for 2 loops we need 2 upper limits, one for the data table, one for the web list. Same way like we did earlier, we'll use get arrow property, and inside that items count. Okay, and this will be saved in IC. So inside this we'll use another loop which will go from 1 to IC. So let's start from here. For j equal to, even for web list the index starts with 1, so 1 to IC. Okay, now we'll write the if condition, if data table dot value in the education sheet matches the value in the items list. Okay, and here the get item value will be j, since j is counting the values in our web list, that is from 1 to IC. Okay, so it will check for each and every value of IC. So if it is matching, then simply the match is found, and we have to write the status back, that is in the status column. So you have to just copy paste this code. Okay, and instead of education, in status column you have to write pass. And once this is done, we'll check for the next value of our in our data table. Okay, since the pass has already been set, we have to just come out of this inner for loop. Okay, because we have verified for the first value of the data table, so the data table loop has to iterate to the next value because we have already found it, right? So what you can do is, in a for loop you can write exit for, so it will come out of this for loop, okay, and end if. And in case the data is not found, it will check for the next value in the web list. So it will keep on checking until it reaches IC, that is the last value. And once that is done, it will come out of the for loop, and between two fors again there will be a status set. Okay, so even for the last value, till the last value, if it doesn't find, then it has to put the status as fail. What you can do is, at the end of the end if, you can just put status as fail. Okay, so it could be a bit confusing in the beginning, but once you start coding, you'll understand the logic. Understanding the flow is very important in this. Okay, so what we are exactly doing is, initially the inner loop will run. Okay, so for the first value of the data table, the inner loop will be run for all the web lists, right, starting from 1. So all the web list values, and if a match is found in between or anywhere, the status will be updated to pass and the inner for loop will be exited. Okay, so once it comes out of the inner for loop, it comes over here, line number 14. It goes back to the next iteration, that is, since once the value is passed, we don't have to search for anything, so we can straight away move to the next value of the data table. So for the second value of the data table, again it will try to match, and suppose it doesn't match, the loop runs for the maximum number of times for the last value in the web list, and still if it doesn't find, then after this, the status, every time the status is set as fail, and since the loop is not entering line number 9, the status will never be set pass. So the final status will be fail, and it will come out of this loop and it will take the next value. So it will keep on going and the result will be generated. So now it looks like my script is ready, and when I run this, let's see what happens. The script will verify for all the values, and I can verify the result in my runtime data table. Okay, sheet 1 is the sheet, and as you can see, it has passed for MBA and failed for other BCom. It has passed, so 2 of the valid values which we had entered has passed, and it has found a match in the web list. So our script is running fine. So next thing what you can do is, you can export this runtime data table into some local file system. So you know the code for that, data table dot export sheet. Okay, and in the same way you can give the path to it, and the second parameter is the source sheet where you want to export. So I guess you can do that on your own. So this was about working with the web list. So I hope you understand how to work with the data table operation with this. Okay, because sometimes we have to interact the application. There is interaction between the application and the data table through QTP, because we need to pass on the values, input values to the application through data table, and this was a very good example which showed you this. Okay, so we now move on to the next assignment.